So Gemini Man, again, latest movie from Will Smith, which is directed by Ang Lee, and it's written by David Benioff, Billy Ray, and Darren Lemke. I hope I'm not mispronouncing that, but interesting assortment of writers, but we'll definitely touch on that. So Gemini Man, if you are not familiar with the movie, I guess just the general premise is that, you know, Will Smith, he essentially meets a younger version of himself. So he's 51 in the movie. He meets a 23-year-old version of himself. This is an exact identical clone. It's not something that's just like, you know, like somebody just happens to be walking around looking like him. This is a clone of him.
It is not his son.
It's right. They're not related. That's the interesting thing. So
no relation.
Yeah. So this movie already had a really interesting premise. But you know, box office numbers as we're recording this have not officially come out yet. We'll see what happens this weekend. But I have heard that projections are that Joker will actually take the second weekend.
I'm sure it will.
Man.
We were in the theater yesterday. It was like
not that many people.
Yeah, it was like it might have been like 50 of us in there.
Probably about 50
out of 400 seats.
Yeah, it's a 400 seat IMAX auditorium, and there were about 50 people, if that, to be honest with you. But just some other general background. So far, as of this recording, the movie has a 29% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, which, yeah, that speaks for itself. So that's that on that. It does not have the most positive feedback so far from critics. I honestly have not taken a look at any sort of audience scores or anything like that, but I don't necessarily think it's necessarily necessary. But with that said, man, let's just get into our thoughts about the movie Gemini Man. You want to kick us off and just sort of let us know how you felt about the movie after we saw it last night?
I feel like this movie had so much potential. Every grievance that I have with the movie was like seconds away from it being good. Like, I feel like if those things didn't add up,
yeah,
that's the problem. It was like they kept adding up, right?
That's true.
It was like, dang, that was almost good. And it was like, dang, that was almost good again.
If you just kept going down this path, it would have been really good.
Yeah, but I kept saying that, and because the way that kept adding up is what I think what made it, you know, not the best movie in the world, you know what I mean? But I think I still do like the ideas behind the movie. Just the writing, man.
Yeah.
That writing was rough.
That's that has to be the biggest complaint for the movie, right? Like the script is just for such a cool concept, for such an interesting premise. That script is just not up to par to match, I think, that quality. And you know what I would say is also Will Smith, obviously, I think we all are very familiar, like great actor, has had a stellar career, you know, one of the most bankable and biggest Hollywood movie stars in the world. And Ang Lee, you know, if you're not familiar with his work, very impressive director. I mean, he's had a couple of, you know, maybe sort of questionable movies, but I think overall, very great legacy. He directed Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is a goddamn classic in my eyes.
A classic.
Just, you know.
Which that's weird because it's like, how do you direct that and then you direct this?
And
like, it just doesn't even feel like the same.
People would probably say the same thing about M. Night Shyamalan. Like,
oh, boy.
Like, how do you direct?
He is the most wishy-washy.
Yeah. Like, how do you direct The Sixth Sense and then
M. Night has no in-between.
He doesn't. It's too extreme.
How do you make Signs and Sixth Sense and then you make The Happening?
And then you make... and I mean, we can go even further. How do you make Unbreakable and then you make Avatar: The Last Airbender?
We don't talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender around here.
we don't mention that around here.
We don't mention that movie. It doesn't exist.
Okay, that movie didn't happen. But, you know, anyway, I mean, yeah, directors have really interesting careers. So Ang Lee, he's directed Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. He's directed Life of Pi. You know, two movies that I think are, you know, well, Crouching Tiger is a classic.
It's like actually a perfect movie. Like, if you ever watch it, oh, man.
Yeah, it's a perfect movie. And then Life of Pi, I really like that movie too. And, you know, here we are, like, with this movie. And what I will say is, like, I don't think the direction is bad, really. I think it's actually really good directing. They made some really interesting cinematography choices that I rocked with. The action sequences were actually very, very well executed, I would say. Like, it was really good stuff.
Really good choreography.
Yeah. It's just, you know, again, like when you have like such an interesting premise, if you don't have a really sophisticated script to match, then all of that can just become, you know, visual noise is what I would say. Like, you could have this really great action, but if you don't develop the script to a place to where there's an emotional connection or things make sense, because I just found that a lot of the movie didn't make all that much sense, really.
Yeah.
You know, like the plot was super basic, I would say.
So basic.
In terms of like what ended up happening and why this clone version of like a young Will Smith existed. So Will's character, his name is Henry, and the younger version of him is just named Junior. And, you know, they exchange, you know, a couple of interactions throughout the movie, some face-off situations and all of this type of stuff. And I mean, again, like really good stuff that was executed from a choreography or an action set piece standpoint. But when it comes to like the actual script and just the story premise as a whole, I think it really fell flat, man. It just didn't work.
It's like they had no base, but they had all the bells and whistles, right? It's like I don't even know. It's like a tumbleweed. Oh. Versus like when you make a movie, you want a tree, right?
Yeah.
It's rooted. You build up
It
like you have a trunk. It goes up and then it starts. You have this beautiful tree that has leaves but it's like there was leaves. There wasn't no root.
Nothing else,
you could just rake the leaves.
That's actually
and you're
really
like, man, those
analogy.
are some pretty leaves.
I gotta give you that. That's actually a really good analogy. Like the movie. So I mean, in a sense, it feels like the movie's kind of empty, right?
Yeah.
Like you walk away, you're not really moved by the movie. I would say there's not much of an emotional connection. I mean, I will say, like, again, I think Will, he always does a really good job in these movies. Will did
an amazing job.
He did a great job. Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
She was actually my favorite.
She did great, right? Like,
I think she might have been my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, she was actually like super cold, and the stuff that she was able to do. Benedict Wong, I thought did well. I think what Clive Owen's purpose in the movie was, like, I think he did what he was supposed to do.
And I think everyone technically did what they were supposed to do.
Yeah. Like,
but what they were supposed to do wasn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Like the cast showed up, but it's like they're trying to make, they're trying to shine shit, essentially. Like they took a script that wasn't that good, but they just, them all being veteran, professional, really good actors, they did the best that they could with the material that they had, but it didn't go far, and it just kind of walked away feeling empty.
Could be a product of course, we've heard this movie had been floating around Hollywood for a while.
Yeah, it's been like in the works for
apparently like
years.
Other people got this script and Will just happens to be the one that took the script.
Interesting. Well, I guess that would explain the 3 vastly different screenwriters that are associated with this movie. Like, I'm actually not that familiar with Billy Ray and Darren Limke, but I do know that the work that they've done versus the work that David Benioff has done are totally different styles of movies and properties, right? Like David Benioff, if you don't know, one half of the Game of Thrones writing team. Everybody knows about Game of Thrones. We won't talk about season 8 and what they did with that, but for the most part, I think people really respect him and DB Weiss and what they did with that show.
Yeah.
But the other 2 come from very different places. Like I know one of them has done a lot of children's focused movies, a lot of animation, I would say, right? So it's just a weird combination, and I'm not really sure if they all actually work together. Like I wonder if this was a movie that the script basically got tossed around and each individual screenwriter filled in the blanks and just delivered the final script.
That had to be what happened, man, because we've talked about how like the first 30 minutes was amazing. The first 30 minutes, I was like, man, I don't know why this movie's doing so bad. And then after the first 30 minutes is over, you're like, oh,
I see why.
I see what's going on here.
Obviously, at this point in the movie, somebody else took over and it went in a completely different direction because it felt very much like an espionage thriller movie, I would say, in the first 30 minutes. Like I was really intrigued and the story was moving along at a really good pace and you were starting to find stuff out. And then like at a certain point, it just switches to like full-blown action movie almost. It makes like this weird transition, but then it also pulls back on the action at times, like where you think there's going to be an action piece, but then there's not. I mean, essentially, I think I say all that to say is like the movie doesn't know what it wants to be. Yeah. Right? Like it doesn't know where it wants to go. It doesn't know, I think, really what it wants to say. And so it just becomes like a jumbled experience for the most part. So it was disappointing, I would say.
For sure. We talk about, the third act of the movie, of course, being, the biggest part of the movie.
Yeah.
And I always think of it as the Prestige, right? Where like a magician, goes through, you do this, and this, and here's the Prestige. But the Prestige wasn't in the story. They were just like Prestige in action. It's cool to look at, but then it's like, well, I didn't really take anything from that. Yeah. It was beautiful. It was great. I'd watch that scene again.
Yeah, that specific scene. But yeah, I guess, the last thing before we sort of wrap up that I want to touch on, like, I think the big sort of catch of this movie is the fact that it's Will Smith versus Will Smith, an older version of himself versus a younger version of himself. What did you think about the effects? Did they execute them well? Did the de-aging and all of that look right?
It was so up and down for me. Like, there were certain parts you're like, dang, okay, that's pretty good, especially given the technology they use, right? Like there were certain moments where they did use facial special effects, right, where they put the dots
Yep.
on Will Smith's face and
Yep.
then use special effects that way. But there were other times where I heard everything was completely CGI, like they straight CGI,
And you notice it.
and yeah, and you notice those differences between those scenes, and I think that was super weird for me, where it's like, why not just make everything, the face special effects,
Right.
because one, it looks better, and two, the amount that his clone was in the movie, I feel like he wouldn't have had to do that much work.
True. Yeah. They shared a lot of scenes together too, so I think it would have been able to work out. I completely agree with you, so I don't have much to add in that sense. The only thing I will say is that for the most part, they did a decent job with it, but there is one particular scene,
Oh boy,
which is in broad daylight, where you see the younger Will Jr. You see him in broad daylight, and I think that was a case of where the character was completely CG and they didn't do the de-aging technology. It's awful. It looks horrible.
and it's so weird that they went that direction because de-aging is really good now.
Yeah, it's actually gotten very
impressive.
impressive.
It was struggling in it, but like
Yeah.
it was struggling in it.
It
But
was-
it was amazing in Captain Marvel, though, right?
Yeah, right.
Like we were watching Samuel, like, dang, wow.
Yeah, like it actually looks like you in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
But in this particular scene, I'm just gonna warn y'all, it's horrible. Like it's actually really shitty how it turned out. Like I was looking at it like this looks like a PS2 video game.
That's what it looked like.
It looks like the PS2 render of Will Smith if he starred in a video game, and it was just like the lighting was off. His face. Oh, somebody's calling me. Wow. Well, that is a unusual interruption. People, what? How do FaceTimes, like random FaceTimes, like do we feel okay about that? Like, because I was not. That person, whoever's calling me, does not have a FaceTime appointment, so I'm gonna just throw it out there.
Well, they in the show now.
Right, you have officially made it into Two Black Nerds. But anyway, like I was saying, it looks bad. That's the point that I was making. Like that particular scene, and I think you'll notice it if you see the movie. So
yeah, but again, all in all, at the end of the day, I wouldn't say it's necessary to go see this in the movies unless you're like super bored or something. You know what I mean? Like if you had nothing else to see, which is always most of the time something else to see, I would say if you can wait for it to come. This actually would have been a great Netflix movie, I think.
actually, yeah, it probably would have been.
If this
done
on
really
Netflix,
well.
it actually might have been amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it's an amazing Netflix film, but
And a lot
as
more people would see it too.
A lot more people would see it, but as like theatrical, sit down and watch this. It just, it just didn't cut the movie scene.
Yeah, I agree, man. Well, those are our thoughts on Gemini Man from Will Smith. I would agree with my co-host here. Like, you could probably just wait on this to come out on streaming or something like that. Can't say too many good things about it to encourage you to spend money on it. So those are our thoughts about Gemini Man. Definitely let us know what you think if you end up seeing the movie. Hit us up on social, send us your thoughts.